All right, folks, let's get into it, because there are three huge reasons why this whole situation still grinds my gears, even though technically, yeah, we can chalk it up as a win. And trust me, you'll want to stick around to the end, because there's actually a much bigger victory here that goes beyond just scrapping tax stamps. I promise, it's worth it. So let's jump right in. Look, I'll shoot straight with you. On the surface, this is absolutely a win. No question. But at the same time, it leaves a sour taste, because while we moved forward in some areas, we also lost serious ground in others. Organizations like Gun Owners of America, GOA in particular, along with a bunch of other dedicated groups, have been grinding away on this fight non-stop. So let me break down the three big reasons this situation still drives me up the wall. Reason number 3. This opens the floodgates for massive future tax hikes. Here's the harsh reality. Anti-gun lawmakers have been quietly tossing around the idea of massively increasing NFA taxes for years. It's always been lurking in the shadows, and you can bet this whole debate just gave them fresh ammo. If they ever get the chance to crank those fees up, do you honestly think they'll stop at $200? Come on, no way. They'll take it way past that, especially when it comes to items like machine guns. And they've already got the perfect talking point lined up. Hey, back in 1934, when the National Firearms Act was first passed, you could buy a machine gun for $30, and they hit it with a $200 tax. Isn't it about time we adjusted that for inflation? Just think about how crazy that gets. If they used the same logic today, they'd peg the tax right to the gun's value, maybe even higher. That $500 suppressor you've been eyeing? Under that logic, you could be looking at a $5,000 tax bill. And no, that's not some tinfoil hat fantasy. That's literally how the original tax structure was designed. It just never got updated. Sure, there are quirky exceptions, like how any other weapons, AOWs, have stayed at $5. But overall, that $200 stamp has been frozen in time for almost 100 years, while inflation's run wild. A couple $100 in 2025 doesn't even come close to what it meant in 1934. And now that we've cracked this whole discussion wide open again, next time anti-gun lawmakers are in charge, there's nothing stopping them from spinning that dial all the way up. And for me, that's a giant blinking red warning sign. And there's another layer to this. Let's be real. Before all this, tons of anti-gun activists didn't even know you could legally own things like suppressors, short-barreled rifles, or even machine guns, if you jump through all the paperwork hoops. Now, oh, they're fully clued in. And is that going to do us any favors? Honestly, probably not, at least not in the short or medium term. It actually makes me pretty uneasy. Because in some anti-gun states, there are weird little carve-outs that favor certain NFA items. Like, maybe they absolutely hate suppressors, but for some odd reason they've got laws that go easy on machine guns. Or they'll crack down on short barrels but shrug at destructive devices. It's a bizarre legal patchwork, and all this renewed spotlight risks blowing up those fragile little balances. So yeah, that's the third big reason I'm seriously bothered by all this. It didn't just shine a light within the gun community, it lit us up on the radar of politicians and activists actively looking for ways to clamp down even harder. And long-term? That's the kind of headache nobody in this fight needs. Number 2. A massive missed opportunity for political strength. Let's get something straight right out of the gate. This isn't about waving pom-poms for any political party. This is purely about protecting the Second Amendment. That said, whether we like it or not, the Republicans have effectively become the default gatekeepers of gun rights in this country. A few of them, like Andrew Clyde, truly have our backs. But let's be honest, many others, not exactly champions of the cause. Meanwhile, if we look across the aisle, most Democrats just don't share the same commitment to the Second Amendment. That's not a hot take, that's just the political reality. Will that ever change? Maybe someday, but definitely not today, and probably not in the next few election cycles unless something seismic shakes things up. So, why does this matter so much? Because if we're talking strictly about the Second Amendment, the GOP, flawed as they are, is really the last line of defense we've got. And here's why that's critical. Who controls the White House decides who gets lifetime appointments to the bench. And it's not just about the Supreme Court. It's the circuit courts and district courts that handle gun cases year after year. That's the big picture, the long game, and it absolutely shapes the future of gun rights. Now, here's where my frustration boils over. Hunters, gun enthusiasts, the entire 2A community, and a whole lot of folks who usually skip voting altogether could have been fired up by this. This was a golden chance to energize them, not just for 2026, but well into 2028 and beyond. But instead, the Republicans had a clear shot at a major defining victory, and they basically chose to settle for a measly field goal while standing at the goal line. Sure, they still scored points, and I'm not denying that's something, but come on. Imagine having Marshawn Lynch or Jerome Bettis in your backfield and you decide to play it safe with a kick instead of driving it home. That's exactly what this feels like. And here's the kicker. Voters aren't clueless. If you think that same massive pro-2A wave will automatically show up in 2026 after being handed table scraps, think again. A lot of people might just shrug and stay on the sidelines. And what happens then? It sure as hell won't be good for the Second Amendment. Because if Republicans take a beating at the polls, you can expect more executive orders targeting guns, more restrictive legislation, and the worst part, more judges stacked against us for decades to come. That's why this missed chance hurts so badly. It's not just about what we lost today, it's about what it could cost us for an entire generation. Number 1. Undercutting the power of common use. Now let's talk about the number one reason this whole thing still drives me nuts. We were staring down a once-in-a-lifetime shot to pull suppressors, SBRs and SBSs completely out of the National Firearms Act. That alone would have been a huge deal. But even more importantly, it would have triggered a buying boom that secured these items under the legal doctrine of common use. Sure, knocking the tax down to zero is nice. It's certainly better than nothing. But compared to what we were this close to getting, it's honestly a joke. Be real with yourself. How many people do you think are actually going to jump through all the hoops of creating an NFA trust, filling out Form 1s and Form 4s, getting fingerprinted, taking passport photos, and then waiting for months just because the tax itself is now free? Yeah, you'll see some increase, but nowhere near the flood we would have had if these items were treated like ordinary firearms you could just walk into a gun shop and buy. And that's a colossal missed opportunity. Because under the Supreme Court's Heller decision, firearms that are in common use get a special layer of protection. Imagine if millions of suppressors and short-barreled firearms suddenly hit the civilian market. Good luck to any future anti-gun administration trying to ban or seize them. You can't easily outlaw what's already owned by tens of millions of law-abiding Americans. That's a much steeper hill for them to climb. Now, sure, sales will tick up, but it'll be a trickle compared to what we could have seen. And that means fewer real-world examples to back up common use when these issues hit the courts again. Fewer items in the hands of everyday Americans means a thinner legal shield against future bans or confiscations. So will these modest changes still matter enough to move the needle? Will we see enough new purchases to build that crucial level of common ownership? That's the million-dollar question. Only time's going to tell. All right, I can already hear some of you jumping in. Hey, hold on! Cutting the tax to zero gives us an incredible opening for a big court battle down the road. And look, I won't argue with that. You're absolutely right, it's a strong legal play, and frankly, I'm glad that option's still on the table. But here's the tough truth. Getting that all the way to the Supreme Court isn't as easy as just snapping your fingers. It's going to take powerhouse organizations like GOA, NAGR, FPC, whoever, millions of dollars, and probably a marathon of years grinding through the lower courts. And that's if we actually pull off a win at the end of it all. Now, while all of that's slowly crawling through the legal system, what's probably happening back in the real world? Picture this. Republicans faceplant in 2028, a new administration moves in, and suddenly you really think they're going to keep that tax at zero? Please, they'll crank it up so high you'll be wishing for the days of a mere $200 fee. And just like that, the whole foundation of that legal argument disappears overnight. It's toast. So when you step back and look at it from a practical point of view, that game plan's balancing on some pretty shaky ground. In theory, sure, it's a rock-solid strategy. If we lived in a fantasy world where we had a truly pro-gun party running the White House and Congress for decades, we'd be sitting pretty. The courts could take all the time they needed. But come on, that's not our reality. We're here in this messy, unpredictable moment. And under these circumstances, I just don't see that route holding up long enough to win the bigger fight. Here's the real win. They couldn't ignore us this time. Now let's wrap this up with the biggest positive takeaway, because this is huge. For once, the power players in DC, the political elites who usually shrug off gun owners and hope we go quiet, they didn't get to do that this time. For probably the first time in gun rights history, we absolutely dominated social media. Didn't matter if it was Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube, wherever they looked, they were bombarded with gun owners flooding the zone, refusing to be ignored. We took an issue that was flatlining, shocked it back to life, and pushed so hard that the Senate was forced to put it back on the table. Massive respect to GOA for spearheading that effort. And yeah, it fell apart right at the finish line, but that doesn't erase the bigger lesson. It showed just how powerful we can be when we stay unified, laser-focused, and refuse to back down. This isn't the conclusion. This is the opening chapter of something much larger. So here's what you can do. Do me a solid and share this video around. There's a ton of noise and half-baked takes floating around out there, and I hope this helped break it down. What we came up short on, what ground we still managed to gain, and more importantly, where we head from here. Big shout out again to Eric Pratt and the folks at Gun Owners of America. If you're not already a member, I'll drop a link down in the description. Think hard about jumping in and backing them up. I'll close this out with a quote that couldn't be more on point. Back in 1783, right as America was fighting for its independence, British politician William Pitt stood up in Parliament and warned, "Necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedom. It is the argument of tyrants. It is the creed of slaves." If that doesn't sound eerily familiar right now, I don't know what does. Thanks for hanging out all the way to the end. Hit me up in the comments. I go through every one of them. If you liked this, check out some of our other videos. Stay sharp, stay driven, and I'll catch you on the next one.